Hey friends, Ash here, WAT News, with an election update and executive order update, November the 22nd, 2020. I was watching this video earlier here, which is Joe Hull discovers NESARA might have been activated, Charlie Ward loving it. So you can go watch that at your own on your own time. But the reason that I wanted to cover this executive order was that Joe Hull's allegation in the video was that she feels that some of this language inside this executive order is could be the activation of the NESARA protocol. And if you're not sure what NESARA is, then go look it up because I don't want to have to go through the whole thing. Uh, Suffice it to say that NESARA is a new way of doing things that's more backed by the people and for the people than for the corporations. Let's just put it that way. Um, so I'm going to read this, which is the Executive Order on Establishing the President's Advisory 1776 Commission. This executive order was issued on November the 2nd, 2020, right before the election. And as you can see, it's from the White House Gov website. And it reads, by the authority vested in me as President by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, and in order to better enable a rising generation to understand the history and principles of the founding of the United States in 1776, and through this form a more perfect union, it is hereby ordered as follows. Section 1. Purpose. The American founding envisioned a political order in harmony with the design of the laws of nature and of nature's God, unquote. See, the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness as embodied in and sanctioned by natural law and its traditions. The formation of a republic around these principles marked a clear departure from previous forms of government, securing rights to a form of government that derives its legitimate power from the consent of the governed. Throughout its national life, our republic's exploration of the full meaning of these principles has led it through the ratification of a constitution, civil war, the abolition of slavery, Reconstruction, and a series of domestic crises and world conflicts. Those events establish a clear historical record of an exceptional nation dedicated to the ideas and ideals of its founding. Again, this history, in recent years, a series of polemics grounded in poor scholarship has vilified our founders and our founding. Despite the virtues and accomplishments of this nation, many students are now taught in school to hate their own country and to believe that the men and women who built it were not heroes, but rather villains. This radicalized view of American history lacks perspective, obscures virtues, twists motives, ignores or distorts facts, and magnifies flaws, resulting in the truth being concealed and history disfigured. Failing to identify, challenge, and correct this distorted perspective could fray and ultimately erase the bonds that knit our country and culture together. The recent attacks on our founding have highlighted America's history related to race. These one-sided and divisive accounts too often ignore or fail to properly honor and recollect the great legacy of the American national experience. Our country's valiant and successful effort to shake off the curse of slavery and to use the lessons of that struggle to guide our work toward equal rights for all citizens in the present. Viewing America as an irredeemably and systemically racist country cannot account for the extraordinary role of the great heroes of the American movement against slavery and for civil rights, a great moral endeavor that, from Abraham Lincoln to Martin Luther King Jr., was marked by religious fellowship, goodwill, generosity of heart, an emphasis on our shared principles, and an exclusive vision for the future. As these heroes demonstrated, the path to a renewed and confident national unity is through a rediscovery of a shared identity rooted in our founding principles. A loss of national confidence in these principles would place rising generations in jeopardy of a crippling self-doubt that could cause them to abandon faith in the common story that binds us to one another across our differences. Without our common faith in the equal right of every individual American to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, authoritarian visions of government and society could become increasingly alluring alternatives to self-government based on the consent of the people. Thus, it is necessary to provide America's young people access to what is genuinely inspiring and unifying in our history, as well as to the lessons imparted by the American experience of overcoming great national challenges. This is what makes possible the informed and honest patriotism that is essential for a successful republic. A restoration of American education, grounded in the principles of our founding that is accurate, honest, unifying, inspiring, and ennobling, must ultimately succeed at the local level. Parents and local school boards must be empowered to achieve greater choice and variety in curriculum at the state and local levels. The role of the federal government is to protect and preserve state and local control over the curriculum, program of instruction, administration, and personnel of educational institutions, schools, and school systems. Indeed, that is why my administration rejects the Common Core curriculum in all efforts to have the federal government impose a national curriculum or national standards of education. Vigorous participation in local government has always been America's laboratory of liberty and a key to what makes us exceptional. The best way to preserve the story of America's founding principles is to live it in action by local communities, reasserting control of how children receive patriotic education in their schools. Here's the part that's interesting. Section 2. The President's Advisory 1776 Commission. A. Within 120 days of the date of this order, the Secretary of Education shall establish in the Department of Education the President's Advisory 1776 Commission to better enable a rising generation to understand the history and principles of the founding of the United States in 1776. Sorry about the noise, guys. New York helicopter. And to strive to form a more perfect union. The 1776 Commission shall be composed of not more than 20 members who shall be appointed by the President. Members shall serve for a term of 2 years and shall not be removed except for inefficiency, neglect of duty, or malfeasance. The 1776 Commission may include individuals from outside the federal government with relevant experience or subject matter expertise. The 1776 Commission shall also include the following ex officio members or such senior officials as those members may designate. 1. The Secretary of State. 2. The Secretary of Defense. 3. The Secretary of the Interior. 4. The Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. 5. The Secretary of Education. 6. The Assistant to the President for Domestic Policy. And 7. The Assistant to the President for Intergovernmental Affairs. C. The 1776 Commission shall produce a report for the President within 1 year of the date of this order, which shall be publicly disseminated regarding the core principles of the American founding and how these principles may be understood to further enjoyment of the blessings of liberty. And to promote our striving, quote, to form a more perfect union, the Commission may solicit statements and contributions from intellectual and cultural figures in addition to the views of the Commission members. 2. Advise and offer recommendations to the President and the United States Semi-Quincentennial Commission regarding the federal government's plans to celebrate the 250th anniversary of American independence and coordinate with relevant external stakeholders on their plans. 3. Facilitate the development and implementation of a Presidential 1776 Award to recognize student knowledge of the American founding, about the founders, including knowledge about the founders, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitutional Convention, and the great soldiers and battles of the American Revolutionary War. 4. Advise executive departments and agencies with regard to their efforts to ensure patriotic education, meaning the presentation, and that's most of it, guys. I'm not going to read the rest. The key part to me was, and what Joe Hull was talking about, was that, does this start the NESARA off? We're not sure, but part of NESARA was that it has to be done in 120 days from when its inception. And within those 120 days, there has to be all new elections. All leaders, all world leaders have to step down, and new elections have to be called for, and that includes all senators, all congressmen, everybody. It's the one way to get rid of all the rot. So, I don't know if that's what this does, because this seems more education, about education but it does talk about forming a more perfect union. And, is this really, Could this be getting us back to a strict republic, which is what we were before, by and for the people, right? Government for the people, by the people, for the people, right? Um, and we don't know that yet, right? But that's interesting about this, that the 120 days is in here, and this came out one day before the election, literally. And so 120 days from this would be sometime in March. So we'll have to see what happens in March, right? Is this the beginning of NESARA going through? We don't know that yet. But it seems to me that another report is now to be generated, and a commission needs to be formed with major figures within the government. So all these people, this is major parts of the government here, right? Secretary of State, the Secretary of the Defense, the Secretary of the Interior, Secretary of Education. Uh, why would Secretary of Defense be involved in this, right? If it's an educational executive order, and the Secretary of State. I'm not sure what Secretary of Interior, interesting, right? Housing and Urban Development. What does that have to do with education? I don't know. But we'll have to see how this all plays out, guys. But some people were talking about maybe this is the beginning of, maybe he put NESARA through without anyone even noticing it, because we're all looking over here, as the CUE board would say, instead of over there where you should be looking, right? Everyone's watching the election. Meanwhile, did Trump just sneak through this executive order? Is this the beginning of NESARA? We'll have to wait and see. Uh, we'll have to see what results happen from the election and everything else, right? But it's possible. It's possible that this happened. I wanted to cover one other article real quick that I saw here. Uh, Actually, two. Was this one gentleman, young internet sleuth, reveals evidence showing over 23,000 Pennsylvania ballots were filled out and returned before they were ever mailed to voters. So could that be why some of these ballots, the people were saying, are showing up and they look pristine, like as if they were unhandled, just as if they just came off a printer or something? We don't know that yet. Um, Trump supporters gather outside CNN in Atlanta chanting CNN sucks. This is the article here. In March 2020, the Chicago Election Board approved providing remote access to Dominion for the 2020 election. How many other elections boards did the same? So if you gave these people access from a remote location to your voter rolls and to all your information, then how can we know that if somebody didn't change this document, this information at some point during the election? And it gets back to this guy Eric Coomer, who they're alleging was also connected somehow to Antifa. So if that's true, then you got a real problem. And we don't know that yet, but Eric Coomer from Dominion was on the call, which indicates Dominion was the one running the elections around the U.S. In a video online from March 2020, the Chicago Election Board held an emergency meeting where they approved providing Dominion voting systems the right to remotely access their machines during the 2020 election. On this Chicago Election Board emergency meeting video with Dominion voting executives Eric Coomer, Director of Product Strategy and Security, and Nicole Nolet, EVP of Dominion Voting, on the call, the board moves to allow election personnel, including Dominion voting contractors, to telework and work from home due to the COVID emergency. This allowed Dominion voting contractor personnel, including election systems administrators and technicians from Dominion, full remote access to Chicago election systems from anywhere. Thus, Dominion voting system administrators had free and open access and opportunity to tamper with our election systems and data for 7.5 months prior to the election. They would have had full access to all voter registration information, poll books, requests for absentee ballots, voter mail-out lists, virtually everything related to the elections. How many other election boards around the country granted Dominion voting similar access? Probably all of them in over 30 states and 2,000 jurisdictions, including every battleground state. They had the key to our election in their hands long before the election ever occurred. And why were two executives from Dominion voting even invited to an emergency meeting of the Chicago Election Board in March 2020? Let's see if we could watch this. Video's not available. Huh, that's interesting. Watch it on YouTube. Is it on YouTube?
I believe Jim disconnected.
Here we go.
I disconnected and now I'm recording.
So for the recording,
Disconnecting. Yeah.
okay, for the recording, all three commissioners, Hernandez, Cressy, and Swain are present. Lansdorf is physically present. Also on the telecom is Charles Holliday, Adam Lasker. Present in the room is Jim Allen. Also public guests, Eric Coomer of Dominion, Nicole Nillette of Dominion. The meeting began at 6:01 p.m. The commissioners are all by phone, and we're at the point of discussion, consideration of the agenda, and have added that we encourage the public to attend the meeting, and it is in the executive director's office at this time, and the executive director is present. In the future, there's discussion about if none of the board members or the executive director is present, then it will be discussion on how and if the public would need to dial in. We've added the audio recording of this meeting, and that's where we're at this point in time. Consideration of the agenda.
Thank you, Trish. Okay, so the first item under emergency business is adoption of new employee policies in light of the COVID-19 coronavirus public health emergency, including but not limited to a telework policy allowing necessary personnel to work remotely. Who will expound on this a little bit?
Adam volunteers if no one else does.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so yesterday afternoon, the board's human resources director, Lucretia Dandridge, circulated amongst us all a policy that she has modified from the City of Chicago's emergency policy, and she's just tweaked it to match the board, the style and types of employees we have and so forth. It is a policy that would allow our employees to work from home through remote access with our laptop computers and have access to their emails. It actually goes against the board's current policy, but of course these are emergency times. This would be a policy that we would then lift as soon as the coronavirus public health emergency has gone away, so to speak. And therefore, some people could still get work done from home. This, of course, would only be for the kinds of work that can be done from home. And later in the agenda, we're going to talk about the kinds of things that still have to get done and that we do need people present to continue operations. But for all other aspects, it would let people go home. And also, of course, it includes allowing high-risk employees to be excused from their duties and replaced with others who could fill in for them, especially for non-necessary, non-essential personnel. Those who are over the age of 60, those with underlying health conditions that make them more susceptible to higher risk, and those who have children, I think the determined 12 months or younger at home. And I do recommend the policy, even though we're going to continue working, and we'll discuss that in several ways we're going to continue working. But for those who can go home, and for those that are at higher risk, we should let them go home, and then the flexibility to do work there if they can.
Are there any questions? Okay.
Commissioner Cressy, just would like to say for the record that in light of the mayor's recent statement that in accordance with that, anyone who is high risk or anyone who's feeling sick at all is been ordered to stay at home.
That is correct. That's an order from the mayor's office, so yes.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? If not, is there a motion to adopt the policy, the employee policy, regarding the COVID-19 emergency, including but not limited to the telework policy?
So moved, Commissioner Cressy.
Is there a second?
So, second, Commissioner Swain.
All those in favor?
Aye. Cressy votes aye.
Okay. Motion
Swain votes
passes. Okay, thank you. Next item, we'll skip to C, the board action to close its offices, suspend election operations, and allow board employees to work remotely to the extent such as possible in light of the COVID-19 coronavirus, and directing the executive director to send notice of same to the
I'm
Illinois
going to pause
State Board
it
of
here. I'm going to
Elections
stop
and
it
the
here,
state phase
guys.
of the
But you
circuit.
could see that it appears from this meeting, and I'm not 100% sure, but it sounded like she said that employees could work remote. But what about the Dominion employees? If the Dominion employees are also allowed to work from home and telework, and someone from Dominion is given access to the vote tally count in the state of or the city of Chicago, that could be a problem, right? Because you have an outside source from his computer, and who knows how safe his computer is. Is his computer safe? And he's accessing your voter count from an outside location that's outside the polling place and outside of possibly even Chicago. We don't know. So that's another thing that's a possible problem. And I just wanted to bring that up because if it's true that the video shows that Dominion is running the show and U.S. elections around the country, who allows contractors to run elections? This appears to be the standard. Dominion are the administrators. The fact they have access to quantity and number of votes before the election is shocking. They knew all they needed to know ahead of time before the election in order to impact the election. So, they're talking in this article about indicators of suspicion. And is there some suspicious stuff? Yeah. I think so. I can see some things that don't make much sense. So I'll have to see how everything else plays out, guys. I'll include the link to the YouTube video if you want to watch the full election board meeting, and I'll include the link to President Trump's executive order. Hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I will report back soon with any more news. This is Ash, WAT News, signing off.